For a long time, foresters and just about everybody considered fire to be really evil. Back until about 1850s, 60s, Native Americans burned a lot. And there were lightning fires. So this whole region burned off like every 10 years or less. These were light ground fires, where fires could burn virtually everywhere and not wipe out everything. The awakening that fire is important happened kind of late, and consequently we've got all of these massive fuel problems. The fuel aspect of these fir trees here is pretty continuous vertically, whereas hardwoods have kind of branches that are kind of spaced out and scattered around a little bit more. They don't necessarily torch like conifers do. What we're doing here is we're trying to cut down on the fuel load by cutting and piling. Very often, places where they've done fuels management during a really big wildfire don't get burned up. When we first moved here, it was right after the logging boom, and a lot of the trees that got logged were actually post-contact invasion trees. So the old growth that was being logged around here was relatively recent. What you're looking at here is a white oak woodland that borders these meadows. The white oaks are being displaced by Douglas fir, which is the standard problem that we've been talking about. Douglas fir forests are kind of sterile in terms of wildlife, that is. What we're trying to do here is stop the invasion of fir trees from just taking over everything. They'll displace all of the hardwoods, and they'll also wipe out the meadows.
The meadow, this edge underneath the shade of the trees, it's always a good nursery place for little trees to sprout up. So unless you have a process that's controlling that, then they're going to be marching out into the meadow.
Yeah.
The perennial grasses, they help to hold the edge of the meadow. If you have the meadow carpeted with perennials, it's harder for fir seeds and hardwood seeds to get themselves established. Perennial grasses are really deeply rooted, so that's good for water absorption. The water absorbs deeply into the soil and hopefully into the water table along the root systems. The root systems capture a lot of carbon, a lot more than the annual grasses, and that's long storage. In addition to fostering the perennial grasses, purposeful burning of the thatchy edge of the meadow, it does burn off a bunch of fuel. If you don't control the process of the trees marching out into the meadows, pretty soon there'll be no meadow left. And the meadows themselves are rich in wildlife. And in particular, the forest edge, the place where the forest comes together with the meadow, is very bountiful for wildlife.
We've gone through this evolution where we've gradually gotten used to wiping out fir trees. When we first got here, there was only one fir tree out in this meadow here. And as part of our project that we're doing right now, we're going to remove all those trees. Just to remove those fir trees, we're talking about, for a couple of people, probably a whole day. What this would look like in another 60 years, say, there'd be some really big fir trees here, and that whole slice of meadow would be forest. Yeah.
It's not that the fir trees are the villain of the piece. These big old fir trees, they're a magnificent, essential part of this land. The problem is humans decided to stop the natural regimen of fires lit by lightning and by Native Americans that were keeping the balance between the different species and between the forest and the meadow. So we're talking about an intervention to hopefully bring things back into a balance. And these little fir trees in the meadow here are like raspberry runners in the lettuce patch. They don't belong here.
You've got to get all of the side branches, or it'll just grow back into a tree.
I have a kind of a joke that we shoot for a dozen every time we go for a walk. We're not always doing that, but once you get started, it's a little bit addictive. You know, if you do it at this stage, it's like half a second, and then 20 years later, you're looking at a project. We have this project that goes for all of the meadow edges, which amounts to 22 acres. We'd like to get the meadow edges done in the next 2 years. And of this, we've done, shy of 7. And you can see some of the oaks still standing out in the foreground, and then you see some that are just a little masked by the fir trees that are in front of them. It'll look very different when we're done.